Tony D and Little Joan with a screenwriter's rant on Deep Fear, a horror movie about some Paris teenagers in the 80s who discover a terrible secret in the catacombs. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books, links in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's The Pineys, books 1 through 9, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Now, this apparently takes place before the wall comes down, and it says 1991, so I don't know why they say the 80s. I mean, it says 1991 right here, so the early 90s, but I guess it's the 80s because it's like close to the 80s. It really feels like the 80s. So the premise is, and there are catacombs in France, right? Deep catacombs. So they decide to go explore them, and they do. And at first, it's a fun time, and then they get to a certain point, and I'm not sure, they don't tell you specifically, but it's either a Nazi that survived this long, who's lived deep in the bunkers and, booby trapped the place out the wazoo, which is possible. You're talking the 1980s, so this would be roughly 40 years later. So if you had a guy who was like in his 20s, he'd be in his 60s. And so it's possible. It's possible. So they get trapped down there, and like he turns on the lights, and then there's all sorts of traps and explosives. I mean, you got, look, the Nazis occupied France for a long time, and I probably shouldn't even say that word on YouTube, but I've already forgotten, and I've said it. So I should probably start this video over, but screw it. Screw you, YouTube. Just it's a movie. It's a movie, okay? Now, I don't know if he's a supernatural entity or if he's just an older guy. I think it would be a better movie, and I think it is the case that he's just the last remnant. It's kind of like the old premise of, which is based on a true story, that there was one last Japanese soldier, a holdout from World War II, on a island somewhere out in the Pacific, and people went out there and found him, and he still thought the Imperial Japanese Army was still at war with America. But they don't tell you. It's called Deep Fear because they're deep in the catacombs. But even just a catacomb movie would be scary enough, being trapped in the catacombs and fighting, I don't know, zombies or whatever. Maybe he's a zombie. I'm not sure. But it's in French, so it is subtitled. But I don't think a movie like this is going to have a tremendous amount of dialogue. Some of it will be I'm sure there'll be a couple of scenes where it gets a little crazy, but for the most part, once the movie gets going, it's going to be a lot of, run. See, I think it's a live guy because of this scene. I think, well, first off, that looks like the symbol for those guys, who I won't compound things by saying it, which makes me wonder why YouTube's even allowing this, but they kind of make them so faint. So is he marking the days, or is that just graffiti? The scariest part is where this guy, he steps into a bear trap that I guess he rigged too. So I like the idea of an older guy who's just a nasty, crazy maniac who's been living in the catacombs all this time, just waiting for Frenchies to come down so he could kill him. And maybe he's been doing it ever since the war ended, right? Maybe he's been, oh, there it is. Oof. That's always rough. And here he is turning on the lights. They don't actually show him, though, in the movie. So maybe it's the sort of thing where, like, you rarely get to see him, or you just get to see his outline, and maybe he's in the uniform. The thumbnail of this movie had him, though. So let's read the synopsis. Paris in the 80s, not the 80s, 1991. 3 students decide to celebrate their graduation with a visit of the Paris catacombs when they discover the legendary 717 bunker. Little do they know it's not the only thing Nazi soldiers have left behind. Yeah, so this could be a very interesting movie. I mean, it's a great premise. Now, maybe it's because I was around in the 80s, and this is very close. It's similar to like a Marathon Man type scenario. I love Marathon Man, by the way. If you haven't seen Marathon Man, see it, by William Goldman. But I mean, this is a real, villain, right? There's no arguing here. Here's a woman getting pulled into the darkness. I'll just leave it on this. I can't find any good stills of this movie. I will say though, the trailer kind of focuses too much on the kids and not enough on the whatever the horror is. I would have liked to have seen one shot of him instead of just the kids going into the catacombs, But I'll leave it on that. What, Joan? Is that all? Is that all a treat gets me? Is like a couple of minutes with you? Boy, somebody's a little hungry. You can tell Joan's hungry when she starts eating her actual puppy food, and I don't give her dinner scraps. She's a very spoiled dog. Very spoiled doggy, yes you are. But you gotta eat your regular puppy food sometimes, Joan. So first act, obviously, and this is a French film, so it's probably going to take a leisurely time establishing the characters in the first act. I predict that the entire first act is going to be nothing abnormal at first. So it's going to be the kids. They're going to establish all their characters. They go to the catacombs. They walk around. At first it's really cool because there are cool catacombs in Paris. They go deeper and deeper and deeper, daring each other. And then the first act ends and the second act begins the moment something happens. Possibly the bear trap, possibly something else. Maybe they see a few signs of what's to come, and then boom, bear trap, and then the lights come on and they're being hunted by this maniac. Second act, one by one he's picking them off, and they're trying to formulate a plan, but they're just college kids, and they try to go back the way they came, but he's either cut it off or they're lost. They eventually, after a couple of them get killed, they eventually start turning the tables on him. And it's a French movie, so the sensibilities are slightly different. They may all die. It could end that dark. But I tend to think one of them's going to survive, but be all messed up. That kind of thing. And like nobody believes him. Maybe he sets off some dynamite at the end and kablamo, the catacombs collapse on the bad guy, and that's the end of the movie, and he gets away, and he lives out and he's all by himself, and maybe he gets blamed for his friends being murdered, something like that. But it sounds like a great premise to me. Again, maybe because of the time period I'm really kind of from, so to speak. Maybe somebody in a modern audience can't identify with it. I mean, that's sort of the problem with modern movies and putting things in a period piece. If you set something in the 60s, I mean, people from the 60s who were adults then, that was 60 years ago. Yeah. So most of those people are gone. The people who remember it may or may not even see the movie. So you're relying on reestablishing that past with a new audience. And do they care about something that happened 60 years ago? I do, in this case, because I can relate to the technology, the time, the entire paradigm works for me. They could have made this movie in 88, or, well, it takes place in 91. So they could have made this movie in 91, and I would have been like, oh yeah, let's go see Deep Fear. But they didn't. They're making it in 2022, 30 years later. I think there's enough people around that they could relate to it, but it is a hurdle to kind of overcome, screenwriters, when you're thinking about this stuff. Usually the rule of thumb is 20 years for nostalgic movies, right? So if you're going to make a movie now about nostalgia, you'd probably set it in 2002, right? Bush era, and people from that era who were young in their 20s, now they're in their 40s with families. Maybe they bring their kids, depending on the kind of movie it is. You know, maybe they're still single on dates or whatever, but it's hopefully it connects with a younger audience and connects with that older audience, and that's what they're kind of going for. Here, they're kind of doing a triple play, right? They're looking for grandparents, parents, and parents. That's a tougher hill to climb. I mean, look, I acknowledge I'm older, right? So I'm 56. I could be a grandpa if I had had kids or whatever, and they had kids. If I had had kids very young, I didn't, as far as I know. But so yeah, I don't know if this is going to resonate with people, but I like it. I think it'll be cool. I mean, it does. At some level, the Nazis are a universal bad guy in a screenplay, so people will be on board with that portion of it. So maybe, yes, it could work. You know, from a production standpoint, it looks good. The actors seem fine. I would just say from a trailer standpoint, it's not, it's something that I would have expected 20 years ago, right? To me, that would have been the time to make this movie. 20 years ago, in 2002, making a movie that took place 11 years ago would make sense, because the people in the technology from that time would all be on board with seeing this. People my age, yeah, do they go see movies? Yeah, but they would probably rather watch these movies at home. A movie like this, especially, it's probably not going to get wide release here. It'll probably be on some streaming service, probably Netflix, I would guess. It feels like a Netflix buy. But I think it's a solid premise. The execution seems fine. I think the trailer's just a little light. I would have liked to have seen the monster, just at least a shot of him or a silhouette to give us a sense of him. But again, YouTube, I don't know. We'll see how this video does, because I said that word. But I'm not advocating anything. I'm just talking about a movie, YouTube. It's a movie. And that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for our more bass takes. More bass takes, Joan. More bass takes. Thanks to all who came out to Lucille's Luncheonette for the big signing today. Next week, Collingswood Book Fair on Saturday, and FanCon on Sunday. It's going to be a big month next month. October's going to be a big month. Book 10's coming out. Lots of stuff going on. So don't miss it. And don't miss the videos. Don't miss the live stream. The live stream will be late again next week. If you missed it, I'm going to be posting it. It's already posted on YouTube, but check it out on the other various platforms, and we'll see you in the next one.